How do you wish to plead?
Guilty.
And are you guilty of the 9 murder charges, the 3 attempted murder charge, and the pistol charge?
Yes, I am.
Dylann Roof. Dylann Roof was a white supremacist who walked into the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, on June 17, 2015, and opened fire, killing 9 black churchgoers. The shooting was one of the deadliest attacks on a place of worship in U.S. history, sending shockwaves throughout the country. Roof's trial began in December 2016, and for several weeks, the jury heard testimony from survivors of the shooting and friends and family members of the victims. But the powerful statements of forgiveness and compassion from some of the victims' loved ones captured the media's and the public's attention. One after another, family members of the victims stood up in court and addressed Roof directly, offering him their forgiveness and urging him to repent for his crimes. Nadine Collier, the daughter of 70-year-old victim Ethel Lance, told Roof that she forgave him because hate won't win. Another victim's relative, Felicia Sanders, said that Roof could have killed everyone in the church that day, but instead he left her alive to tell the world about what had happened. But not all of the victims' families were ready to forgive. The son of victim Sharonda Coleman Singleton, Chris Singleton, told Roof that he could not forgive him, but would pray for him to find redemption. Other victims' relatives spoke of their pain and anger and demanded that Roof be held accountable for his actions. In January 2017, the jury convicted Roof of all 33 counts against him, including hate crimes, obstruction of religion, and firearms charges. In a separate sentencing phase of the trial, the same jury recommended that Roof be sentenced to death. The sentence was not unexpected, given the heinous nature of Roof's crimes and the overwhelming evidence against him. But it was still a moment of closure for the victims' families, who had spent months in court reliving the trauma of the shooting. In a statement after the sentencing, Reverend Eric Manning, the current pastor of Emmanuel AME, said that the verdict was a victory for the American justice system and a testament to the church's and its members' resilience. The trial of Dylann Roof was a painful and emotional experience for the victims' families. Still, it also showed the world the power of forgiveness and compassion in the face of unspeakable tragedy. Some families' willingness to confront Roof directly and offer him their forgiveness was a powerful example of the human capacity for grace and compassion, even in the darkest of times. James Holmes. In July 2012, a mass shooting occurred at a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, during a screening of the film The Dark Knight Rises. The attack left 12 people dead and 70 others injured. The perpetrator, James Holmes, was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. The trial of James Holmes began on April 27, 2015, and lasted for several months. The prosecution was emotional and intense, with testimonies from survivors, first responders, and the victims' families. The prosecution argued that Holmes was a calculated and premeditated killer who had planned the attack for months. In contrast, the defense argued that Holmes was mentally ill and not responsible for his actions. During the trial, the victims' families could confront Holmes in court and share their stories of loss and grief. However, it was clear that the impact of the shooting had deeply affected all the families involved. Some families expressed anger and frustration towards Holmes, while others forgave him. After a long and emotional trial, James Holmes was found guilty on all 165 counts against him, including first-degree murder and attempted murder. The jury deliberated for only 13 hours before reaching their verdict. In August 2015, the same jury was tasked with determining the sentence for James Holmes. The prosecution argued that Holmes was a cold-blooded killer who deserved the death penalty. The defense argued that Holmes was mentally ill and should be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing phase of the trial was also emotional and intense. The victims' families were again allowed to share their stories and opinions on the appropriate punishment for Holmes. Some argued for the death penalty, while others argued for life in prison without parole. Ultimately, the jury could not unanimously decide whether to sentence Holmes to death or life in prison without parole. As a result, Holmes was automatically sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trial of James Holmes was one of the most high-profile and emotional trials in recent memory. It demonstrated the impact mass shootings can have on individuals and communities and highlighted the problematic legal and ethical questions surrounding the appropriate punishment for such crimes. While the victims' families will never fully recover from the tragedy, the sentence given to James Holmes provides some measure of justice and closure for those affected by the shooting. Larry Nassar. Larry Nassar was a highly respected doctor who worked for Michigan State University and USA Gymnastics. For years, he sexually abused young female athletes under his care, using his position of power to manipulate and control them. In 2016, the Indianapolis Star broke the story of Nassar's abuse, and over the following years, more than 500 women and girls came forward with allegations against him. Nasser's trial began in January 2018, and for 7 days, 156 of his victims gave powerful impact statements. In court, many described the emotional and physical pain they had endured due to Nasser's abuse and the shame and guilt they had felt for not speaking out sooner. But it wasn't just the victims who spoke out in court. Several of their parents also addressed Nasser directly, expressing anger and disgust at what he had done to their children. Some even asked the judge for permission to physically attack Nasser, but she refused, telling them they would not allow him to steal any more of their power. One of the most emotional moments of the trial came when Judge Rosemary Aquilina allowed Rachel Den Hollander, the first woman to publicly accuse Nasser, to read a letter she had written to him. In it, she described his abuse's impact on her life and challenged him to repent and turn to God. Her words were met with a standing ovation from the courtroom. In February 2018, Nasser was sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison for his crimes. Nasser also received a 60-year federal sentence for child pornography charges. Judge Aquilina called him a monster and a predator and said that she was signing his death warrant by sending him to prison. The sentence was widely praised as a victory for the victims and a signal to other abusers that their actions would not go unpunished. In the following months, several high-profile officials at Michigan State University and USA Gymnastics resigned, or were fired for their role in enabling Nasser's abuse. But while Nasser is now behind bars, the impact of his abuse will continue to be felt by his victims and their families for years to come. The courage and resilience of those who spoke out in court and the support of their loved ones were powerful reminders of the importance of holding abusers accountable and seeking justice for survivors of sexual assault.